Welcome back, students. In this screencast, I want to go over some background of the International Phonetic Alphabet and give you the layout of the vowel and consonant charts so that we can jump right into filling in the IPA symbols for consonants and vowels in class together. So just to start with the IPA background, International Phonetic Alphabet, so it's an international system that's not directly linked to any particular language. It wants to be fairly neutral in that regard. We don't want an alphabet tied specifically to a language because languages are full of their quirky spelling conventions. The worst violator, of course, of that is probably English. However, there is a Western European bias to the IPA in that it uses mostly the Latin alphabet, which is exactly the alphabet that we use in English, although some of the symbols, as we'll see, are going to be a little bit different. The IPA is a standardized system, meaning it's basically the same wherever you go in the world. So a linguist in Asia can communicate with a linguist in North America or Europe about the sounds of language, and then all of these linguists know exactly what sounds they're talking about. The most important characteristic of IPA, and a characteristic that is quite often not found in individual spelling systems of specific languages, is the one-to-one correspondence of a sound to a symbol. So that in IPA, whenever you see a symbol, there's only one possible sound that corresponds with that. And whenever you hear a sound, there's only one possible symbol that corresponds to the sound. So we have none of this terrible craziness that we find in the English spelling system, which has situations like a single letter in English that has many, many different pronunciations. So the letter A can be an A like in hat, an A like in water, a schwa, which is just this reduced grunting sound in allow, an S sound like in many, an A sound like in hate, and an sound like in cinema. So lots of different ways to pronounce the letter A in English. And in the reverse situation, in English, sometimes we have a single sound that can be written or spelled with lots of different letters or in lots of different ways. So the E sound we find in ski, me, flee, be, teddy, believe, receive, and yet they're spelled in all different ways. Another way English doesn't follow the one-to-one correspondence is that sometimes we have sequences of sounds, or sequences of letters that just correspond to a single sound. So a k sound, sometimes we spell it a CK, and an E sound, a double E, and so on. So the most basic division of sound we find in every language is this distinction between the vowel and the consonant. And I've talked about vowels and consonants before, so here's a review for you. What are vowels? Well, they are sounds produced with a wide open vocal tract. So very little obstruction in the vocal tract. The sound just flows nicely out. Vowels are the minimum requirement for a syllable, so basically you need vowels. Vowels are a requirement for language. You need vowels because they function as the heart of the syllable. They allow the syllables to be carried out into the world, and vowels are normally voiced with the vocal cord vibration that again allows the sound to be carried out into the world, transmitted through the airwaves. Consonants, on the other hand, are closed-in sounds where there's some kind of obstruction at some point of the vocal tract. And most of the vowels are also voiced with vocal cord vibration, or consonants, pardon me. Most of the consonants are voiced, but for consonants we have the option of certain consonants to be voiceless. So we stop the vocal cord vibration for certain consonants. And then the consonants get carried on out along with the vowel in a syllable unit. We're going to start with consonants, and now I want you to get out your blank vowel and consonant chart, and we're going to fill in a little bit of information on those before we get to the symbols in class. So every single consonant that is used in languages around the world has a unique articulatory description. So there's a way to describe each and every consonant to make them unique or different from each other. And for consonants, there's three basic criteria that we use to distinguish between consonants. The first one is called the state of the glottis, also sometimes referred to as glottal state. And this is where we make note of the quality of voicing of the consonant. Is it a voiced sound or is it a voiceless sound? If it's a voiced sound, our vocal cords are vibrating. If it's a voiceless sound, there's no vibration. Now remember, consonants are closed-in sounds. So the next important criteria for consonants is, where does the closure take place? How are we actually closing off the vocal tract? Are we using our lips, drawing them together? Are our lips and teeth interacting? Is our tongue moving up to our teeth, or is our tongue moving up to the top of our mouth somewhere? So we always indicate, where does the place of closure take place? And this is a characteristic we call place of articulation. So you might as well look at your consonant chart now and see if you can see, where do we designate the glottal state, and then where do we designate the place of articulation. And then the third and last criteria for consonants is manner of articulation. And manner of articulation basically means, how do you create a sound? Are you allowing air through your nose on a sound, in which case it's a nasal? Are you totally stopping the airflow and then releasing it in a nice clean release like a stop consonant? So again, look at your chart and see where it says manner of articulation. So you see, the structure of the chart is based on these basic characteristics, with place of articulation all the way across the top and manner of articulation down, up and down the side. Now there's one extra distinction that we need to include that wasn't already put onto the chart, and that's grouping sounds based on their manners of articulation. So you see that really thick line that goes all the way through the middle? That makes a distinction between the sounds at the top, the stops, fricatives, and affricates, which have a very significant kind of closure. Those sounds are called obstruents. Stops, fricatives, and affricates are called obstruents. And think of obstruent as obstruction. There's that obstr at the beginning. So obstruents have this very significant obstruction, where you either totally block the airflow entirely, or you narrow it down so much that you create friction of air as it passes through, which is what a fricative is. And then below the double solid line, we have a different set of sounds based on their manner of articulation that we call sonorants. Sonorants don't have that same level of obstruction. They're much more free-flowing, where the air just flows fairly easily over your tongue or through your nasal cavity. And so we have sonorants at the bottom. So here's the chart again, and what you need to do is grab a pen and actually write that distinction on the right hand side there. You see how obstruents are written down the side at the top and sonorants at the bottom. And make note of, just to keep you on your toes, the ents are spelled differently, obstruent versus sonorant. So sonorants at the bottom, these are the singable ones. Because the air flows nice and freely over the tongue, you can sing these sounds nice and easily. Another quality of the sonorants that you'll notice is that they're all voiced. Their natural state is to have vocal cord vibration. And what is singing all about? It's about carrying your voice out into the world. So these are voiced, singable sounds, these sonorants. The obstruents, on the other hand, have the option for being voiceless. And in fact, when we go through our obstruents, most of the time we will be plotting on the chart a voiceless and voiced pair. Something like a pa-ba or a sa-za that we did in class, where you have a voiceless sa and a voiced za sound. So that's what our consonant chart looks like and how it's basically structured. Moving over to vowels, vowels also have a unique articulatory description, but not including state of the glottis, because we just know they're voiced most of the time. Their normal, natural state is to be voiced. We don't have a place of articulation because we don't have a closure. Vowels are wide open sounds. We don't have a place of closure, so no place of articulation. So instead, vowels are described mostly based on the shape of your mouth that is dictated by the position of your tongue. So your mouth is this resonating chamber, and the quality of the sound is influenced by the shape of the resonating chamber. And primarily it's the tongue that will influence the shape of your mouth. So we have 4 characteristics for vowels. We talk about the height of the tongue, and we make a 3-way distinction between high, mid, and low vowels. We also talk about the backness of the tongue, or sometimes called the fronting of the tongue. How far forward or back in the mouth is your tongue? And again, we have a three-way distinction between front vowels, central vowels, or back vowels. So for a front vowel, like an E sound, your tongue is pulled to the front. If you do an E sound, you can touch the tip of your tongue onto your teeth there. A back vowel is something like an oo, where your tongue is nowhere near your teeth anymore because you're kind of pulling it right back in your mouth. The third criteria for vowels actually involves the lips. So whether or not you round the lips will also change the shape of the mouth. So we have a two-way distinction for lip rounding. We have certain sounds that are rounded versus sounds that are unrounded. So again, if we go to the oo sound, if you do an oo sound again, you'll notice that your lips get nice and rounded on an oo, and an E sound, your lips are stretched out, and so an E is what we call an unrounded sound. Now the last one is probably the hardest one to appreciate because it's the least prominent characteristic for vowels, and that is the tension of the tongue. So how much energy are you putting into your tongue? Do you tense up your tongue or do you leave it kind of loose? So a tense vowel, E and oo, are both what we call tense vowels, where the tongue is kind of tight, whereas what you might think of as short vowels, like an I or an A or an E, these are what we call lax vowels. And a lax vowel has very little tongue tension. It's kind of a loose tongue that can move around a little bit. So if we look at the vowel chart, now we need to plot these different regions into our chart. So the structure of the chart is mimicking the space of the mouth. So if you think of this as a mouth, with the front of the mouth on the left, just like on the consonant chart, our place of articulation on the left was the front of the mouth, and it kind of moves on backwards through your mouth region. Same idea with the vowel chart. The left is the front. So up at the top, we plot front. We write the word front at the top on the left side. And then we have central vowels kind of in the middle. And then we have back vowels at the back. We talk about the height of the tongue as well. And that's clearly, there's a clear division on your chart for the height with those lines. So the top ones are high vowels. The middle ones we call mid vowels. And the bottom we call low vowels. So an A, like in hat, that would be a low vowel where your jaw drops really low. And in fact, the tongue height is probably the easiest to figure out because tongue height corresponds to jaw height. The higher your tongue is, your jaw is in your mouth, the higher your tongue is. So for an E, our jaw is nice and high. That's a high vowel, and an A, where your jaw drops right down, that's a low vowel. In English, the only rounded vowels we have are in the back corner there. Our high and mid back vowels are rounded vowels. All the rest on the chart we call unrounded vowels. And then the last characteristic for tongue tension we indicate by putting a circle around the tense vowels. So when we get into plotting the vowels on the chart, we will make a distinction, for example, between an E and an I, which are both high front unrounded vowels, but an E is tense and an I is a lax vowel. And then I'll fill in the vowel plus R chart down in the bottom corner as well, so don't worry about that too much now. But at this stage, I just want you to have a sense of why are the charts structured in the way that they are. And then when we plot the different symbols in, then you will be able to memorize or understand how these sounds relate to one another. And by the way, all those black lines around the outside is where we put in our guide words. So don't put anything in those slots yet, and we'll do that in class together. So hopefully that gives you a good understanding of the setup of the charts so that we can jump right into filling them in class together.